We will be sharing the recording with the participants who are not able to join. We'll also share a presentation that we'll share with all of you today. Meanwhile, if everybody can go on mute, that would be great. We will have Q&A sessions if you want to ask any question. And we will also offer the possibility to ask questions afterwards if you don't have the time. So please don't hesitate to put them in the chat if you're not able to join. So we have now more than 40 participants on the line. So we will start with the first slide. Christina, if you want. Thank you. So we will just introduce quickly the N4G pledging process, then go into the Alliance, focus on the smart workforce nutrition pledges. And this is very much a discussion, not only a presentation, where you can challenge us in terms of what you need to design and then implement workforce nutrition pledges at the summit. And because we know it's a key aspect as well, we will cover reporting on workforce nutrition pledges and share the information we have so far with more information to come on this. Next slide, please.
J'ai oublié mon truc, d'ailleurs ça marche pas, j'ai pas de son, ça
m'agace. So let me put on, if everybody can go on mute if you're not speaking, there's some French speakers in the background, we can hear you. So the overall pledging at the Nutrition for Growth Summit. So first of all, I want to mention that last week, the government of Japan confirmed that the new date of the Nutrition for Growth Summit is December 2021. And the summit will focus on the critical roles of food, health, and social protection systems in delivering good nutrition for all. So this overall summit invites commitments from governments, multilateral organizations, donors, and development partners, but also from businesses. And while in the previous two Nutrition for Growth Summit, the engagement of the private sector has not been as strong as the engagement of other stakeholders, we really think that the 2021 summit is a great opportunity for private sector engagement, and your participation today is a proof of that. In terms of tools that are already existing to support private sector in the commitment making guide, there are just two I want to highlight here. So there's a commitment making guide, which is available on the Nutrition for Growth formal website, official website, and this has been published. The latest version is from March 2020, and you will find there principles of engagement for the summit and guidance on pledges for each thematic area. So don't hesitate to use that for your own guidance of pledges. Christina, next slide, please. And a second tool for the overall pledging of your private sector is a responsible business pledge for better nutrition. So that's a document that has been developed by the Business Constituency Group, which is a group made of business associations and organizations working with the private sector on nutrition. This is open for signature by any business and business organizations in any sector. And while you have a common part for all signatories, you also have a requirement to make specific qualifying commitments in 3 or more of the 7 areas identified. And so the minimum of commitments in 3 areas is for global companies. If you are smaller companies, or if you're an SME and you don't have the scope to make those commitments, having commitment into one qualifying commitment, in one area is sufficient. And among those 7 areas, you do have workforce nutrition. So if you are interested in having the visibility at N4G of being a signatory of a responsible business pledge for better nutrition, looking at workforce nutrition pledges is a great way to start. And so now we'll go into specifically Workforce Nutrition Alliance and the benefit of pledging. Thank you.
Workforce nutrition makes sense, and we did a business case analysis about what is important for workforce nutrition programs, and we realized that you can do a lot. So as a business, 50% of the population spends 30% of the time at your workplace. So you really can make a difference, and you can make a benefit, and your employees are happier. Next to the happiness, you feel reduced absenteeism. You can experience enhanced productivity. And we also came across a lot of evidence about lower rates of accidents and mistakes because people are more alert. And job satisfaction is also a big piece in it. So in the end, it turns out to become a financial benefit. And the beauty of the Workforce Nutrition Pledge is it is fully in your control. It is for your employees. You will reap the benefits directly. And you you can also can adjust it, and you can do it in your most appropriate way. And next to it, you will also you can also report to the SDGs, to 3 SDGs, to SDG 2, 3, and 8. And because of this, we looked together. We found CGF as a partner to set up the Workforce Nutrition Alliance. And that is a wonderful journey together. And we are very proud to be together on the way. And I therefore hand now over to Sharon to give to show the theory of change of the Workforce Nutrition Alliance.
Great, thanks, Barbara. And Laura, and from a Consumer Goods Forum perspective and any business association perspective, this makes absolute sense. And GAIN's call to action on really focusing on putting employees at the heart of the agenda, private sector, public sector, all employers around the world. This was something we really wanted to get behind. So what we devised together was a vision to really impact 3 million employees in employer organizations around the globe by 2025. And the key word here is impact. We really, as an alliance, it's not only reach, it's really impact. Which is a challenge, but a challenge we really wanted to get behind. And what we did with the team at GAIN is we looked at evidence-based research and work that they had done on what are the programs that you can put in place to really get behind that vision. And the 4 areas that we outlined were healthy food at work, nutrition education, nutrition-focused health checks, and supporting breastfeeding. And we said, if we can get behind those 4 areas as an alliance, what can we do to really drive that implementation across employers around the globe? And so what we want to set out with all of you and with all of you is really making that case for action and helping you to get behind really driving workforce nutrition in your own operations, and with the ambition of going beyond your own operations along the supply chain. So what we're doing at the moment from a Consumer Goods Forum perspective is we're sense checking what that actually looks like and helping companies to assess their current situation across these 4 areas. What would we be able to score and understand where we stand in terms of implementation, working on self-assessment and target setting, and then accompanying employers on that journey to getting towards a pledge or a commitment at the Nutrition for Growth Summit. We're developing an implementation support plan. What do you need in these different areas? Where are there gaps within your organization? Where are there plenty of existing open source resources that we can bring together into one platform? And where can we potentially offer tailor-made support for employers that might need it? This self-reporting mechanism that we're putting in place through scorecards will really help us to understand, as I mentioned, where there are gaps and challenges and where we can really help employers across the different sectors. And we want to also be a vehicle to share best practices. We know the peer-to-peer best practice sharing, knowledge sharing, that really does help develop toolkits on the specific areas. And there already is a huge amount of support out there, and we want to be the global platform to bring all of that together. And just on the next slide, you'll see what that actually looks like. Barbara has outlined the benefits. We'll talk in more detail on the evidence-based programs that Christina will bring you through. And we're really on this journey at the moment, assessing the situation, working with companies to set those targets, develop the plans, what is the assessment report, how we can monitor that, and then work around the reward and recognition, but really understanding from employees how this is important and how we can really bring that to life across organizations. And this ambition of going from all companies on this call are at different levels of maturity in your workforce programs. Whether you're a starter or you're a champion, we want to work with you. There is no large or small problem. It's really working across that supply chain to helping us get to that ambition. So that's the overarching goals of what we're trying to achieve. And now Christina will bring you into the detail of what we're going to do to help you to get there.
Great, thank you, Sharon and Barbel, for giving the broad vision of the Alliance, and Lauren for offering this opportunity for us to share where we stand. Just to say in advance, we're still creating some of this guidance, and we're very open to feedback still. And of course, we want these pledges and the scorecards to speak to what you're trying to achieve as well. So just to put that out. So this hopefully will give at least a bit of a sense of what some of the pledges could look like, with more specifics to answer some of your early questions. And just to start, in terms of what the pledges would look like, they would have to align with what we've already defined as the workforce nutrition program areas, which are aligned with evidence from the literature on workforce nutrition programs that have shown positive benefits on workers' nutrition, as well as many of them have shown positive benefits to businesses as well. Again, the 4 areas, and just to give a better sense of what they are more tangibly. So healthy food at work can be anything from making sure your vending machines have healthy food available in them, to providing free midday meals with very diverse healthy food options in some canteens. Nutrition education programs can be anything from a basic information education approach to a behavior change communication campaign that really gets to trying to adjust and improve behaviors around healthy eating for workers. The third area around nutrition-focused health checks is around providing in the workplace, ideally, opportunities for workers to anonymously and voluntarily get some of their health indicators checked. So something around blood sugar levels, cholesterol levels, BMI, things like this. And then that accompanied by health counseling, one-to-one or in group, in some kind of anonymous way. Group sessions with information about what you could do to improve your indicators if you're at risk. And then the fourth area is around creating a breastfeeding friendly workplace. And it really falls into kind of 2 areas here. One is around creating the space for women returning to work to continue to breastfeed by providing opportunities for her to pump in the workplace, both in terms of the space and in terms of dedicated breaks. And there's also a list of policy changes in terms of maternity leave policies that would support this. In terms of the pledges, I think many companies are very diverse in terms of the number of workplaces that they have. And so it's important to note that the pledges should encompass all workplaces, whether they're in the headquarters in a more corporate setting or in regional offices, or even in kind of more of the manufacturing and factory settings, who are all direct workers of a company. And if in some particular offices, there might also be very specific regional or national initiatives that can be separate, and then they might need to be a separate pledge or commitment. So it's important to keep in mind that this can be varied. Your workplaces are quite contextual and varied, and so you want to make sure that your commitments and your pledges speak to the various workplaces that you have. So as Sharon described, our first effort under the Alliance has been in developing a scorecard. These scorecards are just a self-assessment tool that companies should take A number of them have been, some of you on the call have been working with us to test these scorecards. So we're in the second version right now and hopefully have made some improvements. A number of technical partners as well have provided comment on these scorecards. So there are 4 different scorecards that speak to the 4 program elements, and the scorecards add up to 100 points, and there's greater weight on the 2 elements for which there is a greater potential for impact in terms of nutrition and benefits to individuals. So that's, you get 30 points for a maximum of 30 points for the healthy food at work and the breastfeeding support programs, and 20 points for the other 2. That's a maximum. And what companies would do in each workplace is fill out the scorecard and tally up their scores. And then there's a bit of a, not benchmarking against peers, but a bit of a sense check that you can get in terms of where do you stand depending on the number of points that you self-assess yourself, either as a starter, a bronze, silver, or gold status. And then the idea there is that with the scorecard, then you can really, it's very clear what are the steps you can take to improve on your program, or even what are the starter steps if you've never had a workforce nutrition program before. So just to give you a sense of this is what one of our scorecards looks like right now. We are working towards digitalizing these so that it's a little bit more user-friendly. But you can see, and across all of the scorecards that we've developed, you get basic points for pieces around strategy. So this is how you're reporting on your program. Around policy also fits within this. You get points around the quantity and the quality of your program. So the percent of your workforce that you reach, and then really getting to the specifics of what is part of that program in terms of dedicated eating spaces and number of food groups offered, the diversity and the quality of the meals that are provided, whether they're free or at cost or subsidized. So we have scorecards for all 4 areas, and again, you would rank yourself, and then hopefully you would see what is the next step that you can take. And those next steps would help you formulate your commitment with enough specificity to comply with some basic criteria. So in terms of creating a SMART commitment, we really think that the scorecard is the best way to provide that guidance. The specific, achievable, and relevant components of a SMART commitment would come from following the scorecard and the language there. And so the commitment should clearly state elements of the program against your scorecard. The measurability would come in because you would be able to, in your commitment, say the reach that you intend to have in terms of the number of workers reached as a percentage and as a total number, as well as setting a timeline by when this program would be either up and running or completed. And then, of course, that the time bound is addressed by that timeline as well. We also have a few suggested commitments that are related to reporting, as aligned with the N4G mechanism, is that if that's why you are pledging a workforce nutrition pledge. And then some measurement around your how integrated the program is into policy. And that's really to try to get to some of the longer term sustainability of some of these programs that we hope many embark on. So a workforce nutrition pledge might look like something like this. This is kind of what we're playing with. We're open to feedback around it. But because you really want to get into the specifics about what a pledge would look like, we would imagine that each of the 4 components would have very specific commitments attached to them. So you would have an overarching language. As an employer, you would commit to developing, implementing, and reporting on a comprehensive workforce nutrition program which supports staff health and wellness as follows. Now, in some contexts, you might not maybe want a nutrition education program, and you might leave that out. So you would put the elements in the commitment that you anticipate working towards. So to give some examples, again, against the scorecard, some of the commitments might look like this. So for healthy food at work, it might state something like subsidized, nutritious, and safe meals and snacks, which are compliant with local healthy catering standards, are made available in workplaces reaching at least 50% of all direct employees by 2025. That should hit all the components of SMART. So being specific, attributable, measurable, relevant, and time-bound. An example of a pledge around nutrition education might be to reach 75% of direct employees across all workplaces during working hours with a trusted, understandable, and actionable nutrition information campaign, free of cost to workers by 2025. Again, the components within these commitments can be shifted depending on where you scored yourself in the scorecard and what you would like to achieve. You could jump up a step, you can jump up 2 steps, depending on what you want as an organization to do. And so these are all adjustable. These are just examples. For breastfeeding, again, there's 2 commitment areas. One is around the lactation space, and the other one is around policy. This is an example more around the lactation space. A sample commitment could look like this. But by July 2022, establish sufficient private breastfeeding spaces with basic breast milk storage equipment in all relevant workplaces, as well as 2 dedicated paid 30-minute breaks per day available to all employees who are actively breastfeeding. And then an example commitment for under health checks and counseling could be voluntary and confidential health checks with screening of at least 2 indicators, and of which there is a list provided in the scorecards, and additional blood screening for pregnant women, as well as specialized health counseling, are made available annually and free of cost to at least 75% of all direct employees by 2023. So this would create a package commitment that, again, speaks to the different workforce nutrition program elements that you would like to address. Hopefully, we want all employers to provide a comprehensive workforce nutrition program with as many of these elements as possible in terms of the 4 program areas for which there is evidence. We also have outlined a few accompanying commitments that would be very welcome, aligned, and along with these, again, around the reporting, the policy, and then I'll speak to the supply chain one as well. The reporting commitment, again, an example, again, in the scorecard, there's lines around what good actions and best practices and improvements that we would like to see in terms of reporting. So an example would be key performance indicators are identified and measured at outcome level to assess the progress and impact of the program as detailed above in all the program areas and reported upon annually to the N4G Access to Nutrition Index mechanism or another externally validated public fora. If you do not necessarily want to make a pledge under N4G, but under another mechanism. Under policy, this is an example. The programs stated above are integrated into a board-approved policy within the next 2 years and are regularly refreshed on an annual basis. And then finally, for a number of companies that are large and have multiple suppliers around the world that are not necessarily, that are supply partners, but are not necessarily direct employees, we would also love to see commitments where you are trying to support that some of these programs reach those workers who we believe are the most vulnerable workers and the ones who would benefit most from these programs. So for some commitments to reach supply chains would also include a commitment like this: to reach X% of supply chain partners, which would also identify the percent and number of indirect workers reached, with technical and or financial support for workforce nutrition programs, including one or several of the following intervention areas, those 4 intervention areas. And then those would detail, as we did with the direct workers, the types of programs and the improvements and the SMART commitments that a company would be supporting for their supply chain indirect workers as well. So I know that's a lot of information. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to pass over to Effie from ATNI, who's going to speak a little bit about what reporting might look like at this point. And then I think we are open to questions if anyone has any. So I'll pass over to you, Effie.
Thank you, Christina. Hello, everyone. I will briefly talk a bit about the general reporting when it comes to the Nutrition for Growth Summit. The government of Japan has now announced that the Global Nutrition Report has been asked to become the overarching monitoring mechanism for all sectors for the N4G, which means in practice that they will monitor commitments from donors, NGOs, businesses, etc. And they've been asked to use existing mechanisms to achieve this, as we're talking about a lot of different participating stakeholders. So ATNI, ATNI Access to Nutrition Initiative, has been asked to be the mechanism to monitor business commitments. This means that we will monitor more specifically self-assessments from companies, because the idea is for the companies to initially self-assess themselves on the various different elements based on SMART commitments, and then ATNI will be in a position to do a verification on a sample. So far, we have received support from DFID for the first phase, so to align with the Global Nutrition Report and to contribute to the technical working groups that are working to sort out the different details around it. And we've been in close contact with GAIN to discuss the different elements and, of course, the workforce nutrition pledges. That's it for me in short. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Great, thank you, Effie. I mean, we can open for questions now over the overall presentation. And Saliha, I've seen you have a question already, so I don't know if you want to raise it, maybe add more details on it.
Thank you, Lauren. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Yeah, just one thing, because while listening to Christina, suddenly I had, a point. I may have missed it. Is there a geographical dimension to the reporting, in a sense that you mentioned, for example, about the additional commitments or accompanying commitments for multinationals? So then what are we looking for? Just in the number of the 3 million of employees, or, the 3 million plus the spread by geography?
Yeah, thank you, Saliha, for your question. I think that has to kind of, to some degree, be determined by each employer or company, depending on the context of your workplaces and how much they vary. Right now, we have recommended that it's everything within the scope of whatever are considered your direct workers or direct employees. But we do think that the commitments and certainly the scorecards should be assessed at within the same context. Otherwise, your context could vary so much that your scores would be quite different. And then, depending on the context and the workplace setting, maybe in one regional hub, you can fill out a scorecard because your workplaces are similar enough there. Then you can create commitments for that region. And then I think we've also spoken about the idea of potentially then consolidating, helping you consolidate what is your overall score based on what you're attempting to do in your regions cumulatively across all of your workplaces. Gets a little complicated, but in terms of actually having impact, I think it's very important that you establish programs that are very specific to context.
Okay, thank you, Christina.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat. Otherwise, don't hesitate to raise your hand as well if you want to ask a question. First one is about the voluntary pledge. So just, I think for N4G in general, we can say it's all voluntary. So it's for you to decide if you want to be a signatory of a responsible business pledge for better nutrition. It's for you to decide as an individual company if you want to make a workforce nutrition pledge. And then you also have business associations that are looking at collective pledges they can potentially make. So that depends if you're part of one of these business associations. On the workforce nutrition Alliance pledge, Christina, do you want to add anything?
No, it's definitely a voluntary pledge, as with anything. So as with the broader N4G. So yeah, aligned with what you say, Lauren. Same. Sharon, do you have anything to add?
No, voluntary pledge, but we, you know, we really hope with this constituent that we'll get a big drive behind workforce nutrition. But no, nothing to add.
A broad question as well about how to define nutritious and safe food criteria for the purpose of the scorecard.
Yeah, so the scorecard, if and when you fill it out, there are a lot of definitions, there's a lot of technical information there, and there's a glossary that's included in the scorecard so that you can, it's very clear what we consider and what we define as safe and nutritious. And that definition comes from globally recognized and accepted definitions of what safe and nutritious is. So I would refer you to that instead of getting into too many details. And then within the scorecard, some of that is elaborated further in the points that you can get in terms of looking at food group diversity as well.
Okay, thank you. Just for those who also have a question, don't hesitate to put your name in the chat if you don't want to type it all down. So there's a question about for ATNI, or are there any spotlight countries in Asia Pacific for ATNI? So I think it's more a question about the scope of your work and your spotlight indexes.
Very briefly, the two spotlight countries at the moment are US and India, and we're looking for another one in Sub-Saharan Africa, but none in Asia Pacific at the moment.
Thank you, Effie. And from Ajinomoto, a question about the schedule. So there are actually several questions from Ajinomoto. So I don't know if you want to raise that and explain it more. There's one about the schedule basically about making a scorecard, submitting it, and the assessment. And another one about the influence of COVID-19 on all that. So Ajinomoto, I don't know if you want to add anything to these questions from the two colleagues who asked it, or if that covers it. Okay, then let's just go directly to the answer. Christina, probably for these questions.
Sure, I'll take the first one in terms of the schedule. I believe that we are anticipating that the scorecard would be available for use on our landing page, which is on Nutrition Connect, and we can provide the link maybe in the chat box, and you can watch that space. But we're hoping that by September, that self-assessment and digitalized scorecard will be available for any employer to use and start to self-assess. It's also important to mention that the self-assessment is very much that. We will not be verifying how companies and employers score themselves. And it's not meant to be, that score is not meant to go public because there is no verification process, so to speak, for how you assess yourself. And great questions about COVID. I think at this point, we haven't necessarily integrated in any specifics around COVID, but I think a lot of the questions and the program elements are all quite relevant under the context of COVID. I guess I don't have a great response to that, except that it's still applicable. Sharon or Barbara, would you like to add anything there?
I just might add that I would say in the COVID context, I mean, we really looked at the business response and everything that was happening. Of course, putting safety first was the first port of call of employers in the current context. But I would say it's probably even turbocharged or turbo boosted, putting employees at the center of the agenda, and in particular for the consumer goods industry. All of the essential workers and everyone around the world. I think there has never been more of a spotlight on looking after our own people. So I would hope, I know, that there is a whole conversation like Terry's question on, lives and livelihood and what this will mean with the financial crisis that has started and is looming ahead of us. But I do think, and I've seen from our board of directors discussion right the way down to our steering committee, really driving employee health is something that I feel has actually risen up on the agenda. So I'm quite optimistic actually that it will remain front and center of business commitments.
I'm also very optimistic. Also, when you hear now the whole piece of mental health is at the forefront of employers, but there's a link between nutrition and mental health. So then it can also be beneficial. So good nutrition also helps to improve mental health.
Great, thank you. And just to add to the COVID-19 question, what Thierry from SBN Madagascar is asking is, they also have, in the context of SBN, small companies being part of the network. And so it's how you can motivate, especially those companies, to let workplace nutrition efforts not go out of their budget, considering the difficulties they have. And Barbara, you have started with the added value workforce nutrition program. So can you maybe just add more on how it is relevant also for SMEs?
If you look at SMEs, they have a direct benefit, I think even more so as felt as multinationals. SMEs are in direct contact with the employees, so they see they notice directly if a person is really present and is he active at work, and where nutrition can enhance also his work performance and his presences. I think also when we had a discussion with the companies about the scorecard, they really appreciated it. And so in terms of the scope is maybe smaller, but the impact that is experienced at the small and medium-sized companies is bigger, and the possibilities to adjust it according to the needs is bigger because of direct feedback.
Great, thank you. And so an additional question from Sadaf Sardar about the scope of the pledge. So should it be around all 4 pillars, or can a business contribute to less than 4 pillars? And is there a minimum score that companies should aim for that might be just sufficient?
Great question. Maybe if I'll just answer that if anyone wants to join in. But again, the 4 pillars are recommended. We would like to see employers address all 4 pillars because we think they're all important. But yes, if context or resources are limited, then you pick the ones that are most relevant and possible for your company. We do not have a minimum score because I think everyone has a different starting place, and so we just want to see improvements that people feel that they can take on. And we haven't set up we haven't established at this point what a minimum improvement would be. We do know that against the N4G commitments in general, it can't be business as usual. So it can't be what you're currently already doing. It has to be some improvement, whatever your starting point is from that. Yeah, I think, and then maybe just to add to the point around SMEs is that, you know, we understand that employers are at different places and have different access to resources and different needs. And the Alliance is definitely committed to helping SMEs with technical support in as much as we can, understanding the resource constraints there as well.
Yeah. I want just to add one more thing with the 4 pillars. I think the 4 pillars are interconnected. So I think I think it makes much more sense if you start at all 4 pillars at the same time, instead of advancing with one very fast and then doing the other ones. So I think from our side we can encourage to start on the 4 pillars and then go slowly. That has also a big benefit for the employees.
Great, thank you. Another question from Migro about physical activity. When you consider nutrition as a whole, are you considering physical activity in the workforce nutrition program? Should it be part of that? And that's a question that happens often, so it'd be great
It's a webinar.
Thank you.
Great, I can take that. It's a great point. Physical activity is one of those program areas where we opted out to not include it as a pillar because we felt that in and of itself alone, it wouldn't necessarily be a nutrition activity. But we do understand and recognize that physical activity contributes to, can contribute to certainly a lot of health indicators. Our concern was that that it's more a supporting program instead of a standalone program for nutrition, and so we didn't want organizations to feel like if they had a physical activity component that satisfied workforce nutrition, where really the evidence states that you can do a lot of physical activity, but it's around diet and dietary change where you're going to see the most impact. So there are certainly adding physical activity components would be a great contribution. It's not relevant in a lot of the workplaces, so it's very context specific, but certainly welcome as an additional pillar or an additional component of the program. Yeah.
Thank you. A question from Tina Bacha about what about companies which are already doing most of what that has been mentioned today, because in that case it will be difficult to show any improvement from baseline. So for them, already maintaining what they're doing would be the most relevant thing to do. So what is the response to those companies already doing almost everything they can around workforce nutrition?
Great. Well, congratulations on doing so much. I think that's amazing. I think some of the bars that we've set for these in the scorecards are quite high. So so if you were able to achieve those, congratulations. I think there are components that maybe not that might be an improvement. One is really around reporting and doing external evaluations of your programs, so that there is, especially if public recognition is important in terms of reporting, but I think externally evaluating a program is also the highest standard, because it also allows you to identify gaps or improve upon the program and make sure that your program is also having impact for your workers. And if you're doing all that, then we'd love to learn from you.
And I just say, if you're doing that and if you're a champion in this space, use that influence to influence others. And if you have a happy and healthy workforce, it would be great if you can influence that along your supply chain. So I think there's always room for continuous improvement, even if you're a gold star member. So yeah, we'd love to talk to you.
Next question is around the expected timing for submitting first pledge and then reporting progress. When is it a good time to actually evaluate and report your progress with sufficient time to basically show impact?
I think the timing is more relevant to N4G broadly. So Laura, maybe you can speak to that part. And I don't know if Effie wants to come in on some of the reporting. I think in the scorecards, you know, it recommends annual reporting to keep track of how progress is being made and looking back at the scorecards on an annual basis to see how you progressed. But that's within the Workforce Nutrition Alliance guidance. But part of the broader N4G guidance, I'd have to defer to you, Laura and Effie.
Effie, do you want to add anything to this one?
Just to say that I think it's a matter of sorting out the way, and I think this is what GNR will start doing with ATNI and the other mechanisms in practical terms. So I don't think there are specific details to give at the moment.
Thank you. And just for background, in the past, so GNR reporting progress on the commitment that were made in previous N4G Summit were every 2 years. So even though the accountability framework for the summit is still to be published and agreed, as Effie has just mentioned, expectation probably around annual self-reporting or every 2 years potentially. So next question is around the possibility to delegate the access of a self-evaluation tool directly to local operations. So would it be better to instead of having a central assessment, having just that being managed at local level? What is best?
Yes, Bruno, we are currently developing a digital scorecard, and with the aim that you then can send it to your operation sites and that you get the scores. And we are aware about it, and I think it's so important that you, in the end, you go deeper into the supply chain. So we are taking this into account. So that makes it also easier. Then you can aggregate the different scores globally. And I just want to make one comment on the commitment side. So the N4G the pledge will be 2021, and it is important now to generate some funds to do workforce nutrition programs. So I think it's a good time now, when new work plans are made for the next year, that you're already starting. If you start already lobby for funding for the next year to make it operational.
Thank you. And so a question about when the pledges need to be submitted. So just on N4G, while the accountability process will be shared later, the expectation is that you will have a compact listing all the pledges, and that you will have the ability to submit your pledge until the day of the summit, so until December 2021. But there is indeed a momentum around workforce nutrition, as Barbara was mentioning. So it will be great to see champion companies also investing and sharing the pledges ahead of time. Steve Godfrey from GAIN has also added that this is a component that is likely to be part of a UN Food Systems Summit, which is now likely to happen before the Nutrition Summit next year. So Steve, I don't know if you want to add anything to the fact that this workforce nutrition engagement is not only for N4G, but will be relevant for other high-level advocacy events.
Yeah, thanks, Lorraine. Just quickly, I mean, I don't think we know how the two major summits around food and nutrition will be linked together next year, absolutely. But in the earlier discussions in the business groupings around the Food Systems Summit, there is a feeling that we'll develop the business commitments, of which this would potentially be one, either independently or as part of companies' contributions to the business responsibility pledge that has been now drafted for companies to look at. That there would be a likelihood that it would be featured at the Food Systems Summit, which is likely to be 3 months before Nutrition for Growth. It's really not to worry too much about how those things will work out at this stage, but it is a way companies can amplify their engagement in the SDG 2 through both N4G and through the the Food System Summit. Thank you.
Thank you. And so another question for ATNI around the monitoring. So are the benchmark targets used in the scorecard already aligned with ATNI criteria and measurements? The explanation of nutrient criteria for food service sounded broader than with ATNI.
If I understand the question well, you're asking whether we're going to draw on the data we already have for certain companies to use them as benchmark targets for the Nutrition for Growth. And if this is the question, no, it's not the case. So it's going to be a parallel process to our work, a new process for us, and it's going to be linked to the Nutrition for Growth and the goals and pledges set for the summit, and there's going to be specific monitoring for this, not linked to what we do for our global and spotlight indexes. Of course, some of the things you might already know how they work or not based on the information we already have, but it's not, the assessments won't be done based on what we already do.
Thank you. And just to say that obviously ATNI and GAIN are closely talking to each other around and inputting into each other methodology around workforce nutrition to make sure, even though they are parallel processes, you know, they're all relevant and everybody is on the same page on the global objectives. So that's the last question for now. We still have a few minutes. Are there any other questions? If people prefer to just speak rather than write down the question, please just put your name or unmute yourself, and we can cover those last questions. Okay, so if it was all clear, and thanks a lot for all your active participation, I think we can probably conclude the meeting a bit earlier. Just want to thank all the presenters. It was great to have GAIN and CGF co-presenting, but also to have ATNI joining and helping with the global reporting. So as you can see, we really try to work together to really put the pieces there. And great to hear that you like all the questions and the interest for workforce nutrition pledges. As mentioned earlier, we will share the slides after. We will also share the responsible business pledge for better nutrition, the document. We will have a recording if you're interested. And the digital scorecard will be shared in September, as mentioned. So we'll make sure that we keep you updated with the relevant information. And if you have any follow-up questions, or if you want to share everything you're already doing on workforce nutrition for the ones that have all the programs and policies in place, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you, Lauren, for organizing. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for making pledges and being with us. And come back to us if you have questions.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.